All right, 6 o'clock, so let's call to order our Monday, May 4 meeting of Planning and Zoning. Tammy, if you want to just go ahead and do a roll call, please.
Ms. Logan?
Here.
Mr. Bacon?
Here.
Mr. Van Arsdale?
Here.
Mr. Kerrigan?
Here.
And Mr. Adams is excused.
Okay, moving along, we have minutes for the April 13, 2026 meeting. Have you had a chance to look over those? And if so, are there any questions? If not, would someone like to make a motion to approve them?
I'll make a motion to approve them.
Okay. You guys have any questions, or would someone like to second that motion?
I do have one question. Hold on a minute there. On number 1, down near the bottom, third line up, no, in number 1, near the bottom, it says, Mr. Sloan stated the formula would not actually by right. Is that meant to be Mr. Sloan stated the formula would not actually be right?
You're correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for fixing my statement there.
And then when you stated that the formula would not actually be right, did we come to some conclusion? That puzzled me. It was about the formula calculations on water and sewer, and I had asked why wasn't the formula in there, and then you said the formula would not actually be right. Did we clear that up?
I thought we did.
Okay, okay,
I
that's
think
all.
you said that formula wouldn't be applicable in that.
That's all I needed to know, thank you.
All right. So we have a motion to approve these with the change that Lisa pointed out. We have a second.
I'll second.
All right. Tammy, do you want to take a vote?
Okay, Ms. Logan?
Yes.
Mr. Bacon?
Yes.
Mr. Van Arsdale?
Yes.
Mr. Kerrigan?
All right, so the minutes are approved. So next, on the regular agenda, we have 2 items tonight. Number 1 is consideration of changes to the new Article 4, Development Standards, as an inclusion of language pertinent to financial guarantees. So before we open the public discussion, Laura, would you explain this one?
Yes, absolutely. So this is something that is not uncommon to include in a land development regulation or land development code with a local government. And this has to do with ensuring that a development is constructed and completed according to the approval of the development order and the documents that were presented to the city. Some of this language is derived from the statute, and some of this language is derived from other governments within the state of Florida that require this procedure. So as we go through, it's basically to ensure that a project is developed like it said it was going to. If we move down just halfway down the first page to section 4.07.03, this language is actually in Florida statute, and what it's referencing in Florida statute is when a local government is going out for construction on a public building. These are the thresholds that are used for that purpose. Other local governments also use these thresholds for deciding whether or not a project needs to be bonded. So from the language in the statutes and what other local governments require, I derive this threshold list. So anything less than $100,000 that a project is valued at does not need to be bonded. The bonding includes, the value includes anything that is a cost to the development, which includes landscaping. So anything between $101,000 and $200,000, the city council has discretion as to whether or not they want to require a performance bond, and anything over $200,000 of performance bond is required. And then there's a final provision that if it's over $250 million and a reasonable price can't be found, then there's an opportunity for the city council to consider that the bond amount be reasonable, but not less than the amount necessary to bond $250 million. The next section goes into the requirements of the bond, that they have to be a surety company authorized in the state of Florida. They have to assume the cost of all vegetative plantings, including labor. At minimum shall be calculated at $2,000 per acre. The bond has to cover construction of the improvements, including any kind of sidewalks, common area, green space, common areas, stormwater ponds, external sidewalks, and landscaping. And then we go down and describe what the bond needs to include for information. That Mexico Beach shall be insured, but I think Tim had a comment that that
Yeah, I
wasn't
think-
worded properly.
Just for clarification, I think you all got a red line of what I was
Yes.
changing on top of that. What are you talking about, B there? Laura?
Number 2, the bonding company, you had written issuing the bond. So now I guess I used the Mexico Beaches insured is correct. So you should have a red line copy in front of you also. These are editorial comments from Tim. That we would like for you to also consider. They really don't change the context, they're just QA, QC, quality assurance, review. And then just more technical aspects of the bond and how it's called, if it needs to be called, how it's released when it's released, and what happens if it's forfeited.
Right, the one thing I did have a question about, and this is kind of a policy decision, that's what I highlighted, but on the red line, was whether or not you wanted to record the performance bond and any riders. I don't know that I see them recorded a lot. What would be the purpose of recording them?
Just to have in record.
I mean, because it's really just an insurance for the city, so it's like a private contract, so you're not, I mean, I don't think it hurts, but I don't know that there's a reason to record it. Unless, Mel, you have any comment on that?
Well, in other places I've worked, we've always had it recorded, but that's a different state, so it should be.
But, as I say, it never hurts to record something, but it's not, I don't believe it's
As a
required.
requirement.
So, we can leave it in there about, and change applicant to developer review it. And if they're gonna pay the cost, then they can go ahead and do it. So just, my recommendation is leave it in, change applicant to developer. It doesn't hurt to have them recorded.
Okay, so keep that with just a one-word change, applicant to develop.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and look at all of this to make sure every place it says applicant, it says developer,
Right.
just
And-
for,
And there is one, where was the one word that you wanted to change on mine, or?
yes, just to, on the red line version,
Right.
there's a comment to include the word infrastructure on page 4-2, part B, on the first line.
You want
I don't
to
recommend
delete
including
infrastructure?
infrastructure because this list includes more than infrastructure such as the landscaping.
Okay, so just delete, in the red line, just delete the infrastructure. Okay. And then the other comment I had, and I don't know how far we really are on this, but 4.07.08, where you say, before commencing work, the city council shall approve the performance bond or extension at a regularly scheduled public meeting or public hearing. If you've dictated what the bond, other than the 100 to 200 amount, if you've dictated what essentially what the bond is, if they have to get a bond, would they approve it? I mean, all they're doing is approving what the engineer says is gonna be the cost of the project.
Yeah, I guess again, it's a policy decision, and there would be two instances. It would be that instance that you just mentioned, plus if they're going to waive the amount when it's over 250 million, if they're going to waive some sort of amount that's too expensive or unattainable, they would have to decide that.
But is that really, would that be a council decision, or is that a city administrator?
It depends on how much this council wants to allow an administrator to handle.
I think it should be the city council because the administrator is not a manager. And that is a manager's job.
That you guys make the policy, so there you go, or you recommend the policy. Or if you wanna leave that in, that's the highlighted part of the 4-4.
Let's leave it in.
Okay.
And then you took them through releasing the bond. The other thing on the 4.08.12 that I added on the red line, when the city is asked to assume the maintenance responsibilities for different infrastructure and for other things,
Where are you now? Where'd you jump?
On the
to?
last page.
I'm on the red line,
Red copy. The last page of
the 4.08.12.
Yeah, okay.
So, what I added here was a payment bond, and for those of you that don't get involved in a lot of bonding, the performance bond that most of this section talked about is for the developer to perform and do the work.
Mhm.
And if he or she doesn't do that, then there's money in a pot for the work to be finished. The payment bond, on the other hand, that I'm suggesting at the end here, is a bond of money that in the event that, let's say the city agreed as a part of the platting process to accept the roadways. The payment bond would be to ensure for some period of time set by the city council that the roadways don't fall apart before they can actually assume them. So if the developer came in and somehow convinced the city to accept the maintenance as a part of the process, the city shouldn't be holding the bag if in the first 2, 3, 4 years something happens to that lighting or road or sewer, water, whatever, then there'd be a bond to pay for it, because typically what happens is your developers, once they sell all the lots, they're gone. And so this would just provide the city some protection that if the developer didn't step up and fix it during whatever period of time they had to do it before the city assumed responsibilities, that there'd be a bond for it. So that's why I was proposing that.
I think it should
Seems wise.
be in there.
I was in a meeting in Washington County Commission, I guess about a month ago, and it's this maybe I brought it up previously here, but Deltona, residents were coming up and talked about how bad the water is, but the developer has no reason and no money to fix the infrastructure there, to your point there, if they're done and gone.
They're still building up there, though. Deltona is, aren't they?
These were people that hadn't been able to take a shower for 2 days because they.
I understand, but I think they're still building homes up there.
Was just a different part of the meeting, but this
Yeah.
was by far what
But
consumed.
this would address that for the period, for the gap period between the time they initially constructed to the time the city agrees to take it over from maintenance. There would be a bond there in case the developer
Okay.
evaporated.
Yeah,
to
I think we should.
handle
Yep.
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And let me ask a question. I am not working from a red line copy, so I don't know if your page is gonna be the same. This is page 4-5 at the very end. It's D. In the event the project deficiencies have not been corrected in accordance with the approved plans, the city administrator shall recommend that the city council release said funds to the appropriate city departments for the purpose of completing the required construction. Does that mean that the city will then be responsible for completing the project?
Well, that's what your performance bond
So
is
that's-
intended to do.
Okay,
Now,
but,
the question would be, I guess, Laura, does it have to disperse it to the city department, or the city could technically contract out?
I think the city could contract out.
So maybe we change that language. The city council said release said funds. They got to the appropriate department.
How about we just take out, city council release said funds for the purpose of completing the required
Right, I
construction.
think so.
because it sounds like the way that's worded, that the city would be.
Yeah, because ordinarily the city would contract it out.
Okay,
Good catch.
So Laura, is that everything you have?
On this section.
All right, well then, let me officially open the public discussion in case John wants to know. All right, then that public discussion is closed. Board discussion, we've started that. Anything else?
On the 60 days, is that 60 days,
Which section are you on?
let's see.
Page.
I'm on C,
There's so many copies going on here. Is
4-5.
I think
Yes,
it's
last page is two above
Yeah.
the red line section.
the 60 days, is that 60 days to get another contractor in, or applicant will have 60 days from the date of receipt upon the bond?
This is in the instance that the bond is forfeited, and because we found something that that needs to be fixed, and the developer, he or she is not fixing it, then the developer will have 60 days from receipt of the bond funds by the city to correct. So, yeah, that is kind
I
of,
don't,
let me think about this again.
I've had to complete some jobs through bonding, and you usually have a certain amount of time to get another contractor in to complete the work.
Yeah, I'm looking at that, or maybe C comes out and you just have D.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. That makes more sense.
There should be a time frame. Is what I'm saying.
Well, but once the bond is called and the money comes out to the city, you don't want to put the city under constraint of when it has to finish. So if C comes out, in B, you tell the developer, we got the money. We're putting it in escrow. We're gonna finish the project based on the bond. And then D says that, the city administrator is gonna recommend the release of those funds to complete the construction. You don't wanna hamstring
You
the
don't
city.
put a
of
time frame on that.
Not for the city aspect, I don't believe. Not that the city won't move in due diligence, but I hate to put a time frame on it, because then what happens if the city doesn't do it within that period of time? If they can't complete the construction. And depending upon when it is, it could be a lot of roadways and stuff that might not be finished in 60 days or some discrete time frame.
So the developer has essentially in section 4.07.09, 2 years after the city has accepted or approved the performance bond to complete the work. Is that the time frame you're looking for?
Yeah. That would be how long they have to do it.
Yeah.
But once we call the bond, the city should have the discretion of how quickly to move to complete the project.
So I've got some questions on this. Is this for any development at all? I mean, is this for even individual homeowners, or is it only for any sort of major developments or anything like that? Okay.
Yes, not
Do
individual homeowners.
we need to make that clear?
So, if we go back to,
And would this also be like when we had our,
so a single-family home doesn't get a development order.
okay,
So the first section, the purpose of this section is to guarantee that a developer will complete a project in accordance with an approved development order. So that in itself would exempt a single-family home building permit.
now does bonding also go to people like the Point Broadband when they were, with their projects, when they were tearing up our roads?
You make a good point. Some local governments do require those types of bonds.
Yeah.
We haven't included that here.
Okay,
I'm writing a different ordinance to do that
okay,
elsewhere, but, I mean, that's a good point. We probably should include something about right-of-way stuff,
Utility.
yeah.
because I remember they caused a lot of issues, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll send you some language on that.
That was something I came across with the other local governments I was reviewing, that they did require that type of bond for utility work.
Any other questions in this Article 4 revision?
That's all I have.
Okay.
So I will provide Laura some sample language on the bonding for the right-of-way. And,
I have it, but you can send me.
oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was in the same code as I found some of this information.
I'll send you mine.
Okay.
So do we need a motion to approve what we've covered here at this point or not?
Well, it's gonna come back to you at some point. I mean, you can recommend it with the changes we've discussed if you want to, but
That helps me.
that'll
Yeah.
help.
All right, would someone like to make a motion to approve this with the changes we've agreed on? All right, Tammy, do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
I'll second
Okay. I think Bruce was first, so.
I'm sorry, was that Mr. Bacon? That-
Yes,
Yes.
Mr. Bacon
Okay.
first, Mr. Armsdale second. You want to take a vote?
Okay, Ms. Logan,
Yes.
Mr. Bacon,
Yes.
Mr. Van Arsdale,
Yes.
Mr. Kerrigan.
Yes. All right, having completed that one, we move on to number 2, consideration of changes to the new Article 5 landscaping. So, Laurie will take us through that one as well, please.
Certainly. So, if you are familiar with the current Article 4 in the Land Development Code, you can see that it's a pretty hefty article. That's because a good portion, if not 60% of that article is the floodplain management ordinance that's been incorporated into the Land Development Code. That was recently updated, I think in 2024, in fall of 2024, so that's not part of our consideration tonight, although it will be part of this article once we put everything all, package it all together. That just hasn't been codified, and it's not in the American Legal version of the code, which is our website version. So it will be codified and put into this chapter. It just won't be changed because you just looked at that, or somebody just looked at that. You should have just looked at that less than 2 years ago. So that's the majority of this article. The rest of the article includes the landscaping requirements and protection of preservation of environmentally sensitive lands. And then at the last portion of this chapter was the stormwater section, which was maybe a page and a half, but that has been moved to section 3.10.00, which we talked about a few weeks ago, and it's now much expanded so that we have better, healthier stormwater requirements. so, having said that, there is, the section that I mentioned, the environmental protection section, I did not, submit to you today. And we can talk about this after we're done with this, but, that will be the only portion of the code that you haven't seen yet. And I submit we can look at that at the same time we look at the whole package, with any recommendations you make to change those environmental conditions, those environmental regulations. I can include that then before it goes to the city council. So this is the landscaping section. This talks about what a developer or somebody who's applying for a development order must conduct and must design on their site as part of their site development application. So we're talking about the general landscaping requirements, the applicability. There's a new section about exempting palm trees from consideration as a tree count, since they're not technically a tree, they're technically a grass, and they don't provide a lot of shade or habitat. It's not saying you can't install a palm tree on your property, you just can't use it as a calculation for the landscaping requirements. So you can use it in addition to is what it is. Talks about maintenance responsibility, and then we go into the technical aspects of how much is required on the site, how much is required in the vehicular use area, which is essentially the parking lot, and then we get into the buffer zones. The buffer zones are what we use to help mitigate incompatible uses between each other. So if you have a commercial use next to a residential use, you want to have a buffer. The chart that we have currently in our land development regular code did not include the townhome district, so I had to add that to both of, we're on page 5-4, table 5.02.01. I had to add that, and when that happened, I realized as I went back and looked at this again tonight that some of the required buffers were moved to an exempt, and I can go through those if you need to. But for example, the high density residential to the tourist mixed use would be exempt. Public institutional to townhome development would be exempt. Tourist commercial to general commercial would be exempt. General commercial to tourist commercial would be exempt. Townhome district to public institutional would be exempt. But then down on the bottom, tourist mixed use would be required. Where it says E, we put an R for the next to the residential low density, next to the residential general, and then going on down a little bit next to under the PI, the public institutional. So there would be some alteration there as my suggestion as to what's required and what's not. So this chart is something I really want you to be comfortable with. It's basically telling the developer who is required to put a buffer if you're next to a certain zoning district. So if I'm looking at this and I'm looking down and I see general commercial, if I go across and see these R's, these are the required. These are required to have a buffer when they're next to residential low density, when they're next to residential general, when they're next to high density residential and townhome district. And then they would be exempt against tourist commercial, public institutional, required for public institutional, required for recreation, required for preservation, required for tourist mixed use. So that's how that table reads in general. But I want you to be comfortable that, that these are what the requirements will be for buffering when you're abutting a different zoning district.
Back up just a couple of sentences there. I thought you said the tourist mixed use would be required for residential low density and residential general, but it shows as exempted.
Right, that was my comment, to make those R's.
Okay.
Yes, from the E, because when the townhome district got added to the table, it skewed some things, and that was one of the things I noticed when I was reviewing this earlier today.
We're gonna have a public comment, but I'm gonna wait till, have you gotten through everything first?
There's more in this section, I can continue.
Is that okay? So let
or do you
her
wanna
cover
talk
everything, then we'll bring it up, okay?
Okay. So then we go down into the design of materials and what's required for landscaping. I did notice too, as I was reviewing this afternoon, I need to add a buffer dimension, so right now, I think there was, I need to add a 5 foot or a 10 foot buffer requirement, because right now it just says you have to have one, it doesn't say how big it is. So that's something to note. We're talking about, we go down, we talk about the installation of plants and how they have to be healthy, essentially, that they can't, the plantings can't interfere with any utility lines, sewer lines, water lines. They can't be located within the site triangle, and the site triangle is that imaginary area where if you're in a vehicle and you're at a stop sign, you need to be able to see down the road each direction without anything inhibiting your vision, including shrubbery, trees, whatever. So there has to be a clearance there. So this is basically saying we have to be careful what we plant and how big it gets in that site triangle. We are requiring 40% of the total number of the individual plants to be native. And it says from a listed approved list below, but I took the list out, and what I propose to add is the last sentence here is the native determination is made by the Florida Native Plant Society as listed on their website for Bay and Gulf counties, and they actually have a really great tool that you can type in your zip code or your county, and it will bring up all the native vegetation, and it divides it by shrub, tree, ground cover, flowering plants, whatever, however you want it to be classified. So it's a great tool for those who are not maybe as knowledgeable about what is native and what is not. Then we talk about how on the landscaping, how many trees, how many shrubs, how much ground cover you have to plant. Then we talk about non-living materials, which includes mulches, any kind of rock, gravel, or sand. And we note that artificial plants cannot be used to meet the landscaping requirements, because we know there's turf grass out there that gets used quite often. Then we get into the tree protection section, how we protect them during development. We talk about the drip line, which is 6 feet from the trunk of a tree, when it is 6 feet, when it's less than 6 feet. When the drip line is more than 6 feet from the trunk of the tree, then we have a maximum of 20 feet for the drip line. We talk about the protected trees, which is a 4-inch in diameter at breast height of hardwoods and 8 inches of softwood. The palm trees are not considered a protected species unless it's designated as such by the city council, which would be a heritage tree. We require them to be safeguarded from damage during construction. We require that they be replaced by the developer with certain ratios, and the ratio depends on whether or not it's in the footprint of the structure or the driveway, or whether it's not in the footprint of the section. So there's a different ratio depending on where the tree is going to be, what is going in place of the tree that's being removed. So there's an incentive to try to protect those.
Some cities have a kind of a fund.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have something like that in
I don't.
A fund for replacement?
Yeah, in lieu of actually the developer actually planting, then they would have a tree replacement cost that would have to be paid to the city, and then the city would facilitate planting trees somewhere else. But again,
That's a policy.
That's a policy issue for you guys.
You would need to decide whether or not you want those trees to be replaced on that site, or you pay the city and the city can plant them elsewhere. That's how that goes. We have some oak thickets down on the east side, so their issue here is protected. And then we get into the heritage tree definition and how we're going to protect them. How we're going to protect trees in general. And then the section that's forthcoming is the environmentally sensitive lands and how we're going to treat those. That includes wetlands and other types of considerations, and that will come to you at our next meeting. So that's that in a snapshot.
All right, well, she's taking us through it. Let's open up the public discussion and please come up.
Make me come up. John Harrell, 43 First Street. A couple questions. I'd like to go back to the chart.
Yep.
Is this just, this buffer zone chart, that's for single-family homes as well as development?
So if it's a platted subdivision, it's usually meant for the platted subdivision and not individual single-family homes.
Okay, so this
So-
chart would not apply to someone building on a lot in an already established neighborhood?
If it's a platted subdivision, it should be covered in the plat, in the
Okay.
development order with the plat.
Well, I guess what sparked my interest was we have residential homes in commercial property.
Mhm.
So which takes precedent?
The zoning
No, what I'm saying is if a commercial business is going in to this lot, but there's a residential house next door, still use the commercial.
So it would apply to the zoning district. So even though, as you mentioned, a single-family home can go into
Right.
general commercial, it would be whether or not it's general commercial next to general commercial on the zoning map.
But what I'm saying is that what if it's a general commercial next to a residential home?
Is the residential home in the general commercial zoning district?
It can be.
Right, if it is, then there wouldn't be a
Well, let's
buffer
take La
required.
Siesta, for example.
So that's something that you have to be aware of as a purchaser.
What I'm saying, if someone goes in there and buys one of the houses, tears it down and wants to put a commercial business in
In
there,
general commercial?
it's general
Yes.
commercial, even though they allow residential housing there. Does the commercial landscaping rules apply to that business? Does that make?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
So now you got that commercial building. Now there's another lot that's next door. Someone comes in and puts a single family home there
on a general commercial lot.
on a general commercial lot. Do they have to follow the commercial?
They
Or do
do
they
not
have to
have to put
follow?
in a buffer,
They do not.
right?
And do they have to abide by the setbacks under general or
Under general.
under general?
Yeah, that's
So
in
they
the
could
zoning,
build their
it's
house.
in Article 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Then the other one was back to. Thank you for that.
Sure. And that's the debacle we have
Yes.
by allowing what we do in the categories we have.
And now you said because of Tallahassee, we can't change that. Correct?
That's what I said.
That's what you said.
And we cannot change it because, don't tell me that because
Well,
Tallahassee said so.
It's
What
a
is
Burt,
there
well,
reason?
the historical reason is because there's a Burt Harris Act in the Florida statutes that is very well greased and says that if you take away certain rights that you have, then you can have a claim against the local government. And it's very touchy and it can be a long, lengthy process and it's sometimes hard to show, but that's usually the reason that's used for not taking away rights that are there today. And that's been in the law for years and years and years.
Well, Burt Harris has a fairly short statute of limitations, so when the city council gets the entire land development code to consider, it may be prudent for the city to invite all the citizens to come and start the clock on the Burt Harris portion for that.
No. But that wasn't one of my questions.
Yeah.
You talked about palm trees. So are what you recommending or suggesting to this board that they recommend to the council that in future development, you can't use a palm tree as one of the 1 in 50 linear feet you need for a lot, say in residential?
Not to meet the landscaping requirements. You can plant one if you want to.
But that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right now, it is allowed.
Right.
And you're suggesting that they not do that?
Right.
And that is because?
Because they don't provide much benefit to anyone, really. If the only benefit that they really provide, and that's only if you let the fronds fall, and most places don't, they cut them off, is bat habitat. Because the bats will go up there and they'll live up under the fronds, but most people and places will cut them off once they die and fall down. Otherwise, they're really
But
not
I
a
mean,
shade
there's no
tree.
requirement from the state, you're recommending that
Yes,
to the
that's
council?
correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to,
Yeah.
because I know there's some palm tree dealers gonna be.
And is that-
too.
Personal recommendation or based on what you've done with other communities and observed other
It's not
municipalities?
uncommon for other communities to have this regulation also. I mean, if you're trying to replace shade, palm trees is not the way to do it. That was lost from
I don't
Michael.
disagree, I just wondered if I.
Yeah.
And palms
Some of the
don't,
other-
palms don't drink up as much water as, say, a magnolia or a hardwood. I mean, they
Your
drink.
root ball is just a ball, it's just,
Yeah.
it doesn't.
No, I understand what she's
Yeah.
saying, but I'm just, want clarification,
Sure.
thank you.
Okay, all right, that closes the public discussion, let's open the board discussion. I have some notes in here, but I'll wait. Would you like to
Okay,
start?
I'll start. Let's see, on page 5.1. Under section 5.01.02 applicability, this section shall apply to all new development within Mexico Beach. Redevelopment where 50% or greater of the site is destroyed by force majeure is also subject to these regulations. My question is, does this apply to lots rebuilding after Hurricane Michael? Is that captured in this?
Yes, I thought that was something I heard in previous discussions that we had, that there was a desire for developments to replace what was lost due to a hurricane.
And I know I've brought up sort of tree loss prior, so I went back and did a little bit more research. I've done some, but if you want to understand the data of what Mexico Beach lost from the hurricane, I'll pass it around, and I actually emailed it to Tammy and Mel just before 5 o'clock today, or right around. But generally, the U.S. Forest Service, the USDA, and the USGS agree that 60 to 80% of tree cover was lost in Mexico Beach. In general, it was about 63% of the area in the greatest impact zone, which Mexico Beach is described as ground zero. 80% of the tree canopy was lost. That didn't mean all the trees were killed. In those oaks and hardwoods, they lost so many limbs and big branches that was the canopy. But the U.S. Forest Service says the tree survival rate was 68%. In catastrophic zones like Mexico Beach, survival dropped to approximately 36%. So the agreement is that 63% of the trees were lost in Mexico Beach. And when I've had clients come back over to Mexico Beach in the past few years, that's the main note that I hear. Wow, Mexico Beach is building back. They've cleaned up, but what happened to all the trees? Well, this explains what happens to all the trees. And if they're putting back a single palm tree stalk, to your point, you don't see the canopy. Bottom line, published data supports 60 to 80% of trees lost in Mexico Beach impact zone. So if we're trying to get back to what we hear the citizens in general of Mexico Beach say, is that we want Mexico Beach to be like it used to. Whether that means a pier and restaurants to sit down in, it also includes the trees that used to be here. So this policy may need to not just replace what used to be here, but perhaps stiffen those regulations so that we can get back to more tree cover, canopy, and water runoff absorption.
But there were palm trees here before. I mean, there are palm trees. As a matter of fact, it seems the palm trees fare best.
Exactly. There were palm trees, there were pine trees, and there were oak trees and magnolia trees. So the table that you took out, those are, I think, what generally appear to be the native species.
I mean, I wouldn't think about completely banning palm trees. I could see possibly if you weight, if you could weight different trees, I don't know. If you could do
They're not being banned. There's no banning of the
Well,
palm trees.
okay.
They're just not allowed to be
Just
calculated
you
in
can't-
the-
It doesn't count.
You can't count, right?
Right.
Well, remember that the requirement of per 50 linear feet does not exclude planting more trees. And a lot of people say, oh, I'll have to plant trees and I'm just gonna do the bare minimum. They could put in 10 palm trees if they wanted to. It just depends on the person.
Or it depends how much they just spent on building their house.
Well, you know, landscaping is part and parcel of house building, so.
But it's also gets near the end when you're
Doesn't
completely out of
matter.
money.
Does not matter.
It really doesn't, it's no different than
No.
the driveway or anything else
That's
that's
right.
required. But,
So, as much as I don't like saying palm trees cannot count, I understand it and I will agree with that because yes, the canopy is vital for us to regrow. And as much as I like palm trees, they don't offer that much shade we need to get the bigger things, which are gonna take time anyway. Except most of us are not going to replant our pines, you know. Unfortunately, that's the best tree, but it's not the best if you're gonna put it up against the buildings, and we don't have the room to replant all the pine trees that were here. So we're going to have to make this uncomfortable decision to require shade trees instead of palm trees, I think, in order to regain that canopy.
I agree. Do you have any other
Oh, yes.
specifics as we go through?
Yes,
Okay.
okay, let's stay on that page 5-1, right below what we just talked about. This section shall not apply to the construction of a single-family home on a parcel located outside of a platted subdivision. Single-family homes constructed on a single lot inside of a platted subdivision shall adhere to the planning requirements of the approved plat, Where do we not have approved subdivisions, platted subdivisions in the residential section? Aren't almost all of these, I mean, my old neighborhood is an approved,
Bailey Lane,
that's not a platted subdivision?
not that I can find.
It is not.
Huh. Okay, so, all
I just
right.
happen to be doing something on that, that's how I know that.
Yes, yes.
But I do have a question maybe related to that. Laura started this with. I think you said that this was primarily for developers and developers. Is that correct?
Right.
So how does this guide the public or not guide the public for all the residential building permits that are being requested?
So, the subdivision plat actually is accompanied by a development order. So the development order should have a landscaping plan as part of the application for approval. And it may include a hop tree on every lot. We don't say that it has to. We can say that it has to. But it's usually the landscaping at the front where it abuts the roadways where landscaping is required. So if you want platted subdivisions to be required to include a tree on every lot, we can add that language. It doesn't say that today. If that's your question, did I answer your question?
You know, just the average
Yeah.
residential lot owner that walks into this building to
Yep.
get a building permit,
Right,
not a developer.
right.
What guides them, what informs them as they're in the planning process? I need to be prepared to
To put a
count
tree.
this as a tree or not include this as a tree
Right.
definition and how many?
Well,
This
it would have
policy
to
or
be part, so somebody at the city needs to be coordinating with the building official that says, hey, this plat was approved with a tree requirement on every lot. We need to make sure that when they get their CO for their building permit, that tree is planted.
It used to be 7 trees. I don't know if it still is.
Well, it's the math of the perimeter of
Right.
the lot.
Mhm.
What I'm trying to figure out is, does what we're writing apply to a residential home builder? Not a developer, just the person that owns a lot that's going to build a home.
Only if we require it in the development order that's that's attached to that plat. We haven't said that we have to have a tree on every lot. We can say that, but it doesn't say that right now.
And you're losing me on the a tree on every lot.
Yeah, you'd think that in a subdivision would be the exact same regulation that I had to go through for each lot.
Which,
Do-
what
do-
did you have to do?
I needed 8 trees total.
1
Yeah.
foot for one tree for every 50
50 feet.
linear feet.
Correct,
And
yeah.
That's at the abutting, it's at the right of way, not on the individual
No.
lots.
No, it's every lot.
I had
It's on the
You
entire
have to
lot.
put 8 trees on every lot.
It's
Yes.
one tree
Yeah.
for every
Okay.
50
20-something
linear
years.
feet, and you measure the lot's entire perimeter. And you have to have 1 tree for every 50 feet. That's been in existence since the beginning,
Yeah, I would think that'd be the exact same thing for,
and that should be
Subdivision.
made.
would it be, would it?
That's what I thought it was. That's why I'm trying to
It
get
is.
clarification here.
That is it. My lot's 100 by 90, I had to have 8 trees.
I built a home right down the street,
Who
Bo Creel said you have to
directed your
have
attention
8
that you have
trees.
to put them in?
The
What?
building department,
It was in,
Okay.
to my builder.
And I was told by Greg in our building department that that's something that
No.
Willie, who works for him, goes out and
Counts.
checks for before you get a CO.
Your CO, that's right.
I'm gonna need to look again, because I don't remember reading that, but,
It's in this.
What I just want to make sure of is that we don't write some type of policy that says this is for developers and developments and residential homeowners, you can get away with 0 trees. That is not what we're
there's nothing
saying.
worse than you
Right.
see a subdivision that they got some nice landscaping up front and not
Yeah.
a
I agree with that.
single tree.
Mm-hmm.
You better be on it.
I'm gonna have to look, because I don't remember reading that, so I'll look again.
It's in here.
And the word section there, Laura, in that paragraph that Ms. Logan read, you may want to revisit that word section, because you got 5.00.00 going to 5.
Yeah, so that might be just an interpretation issue, because I see the sections being 5.01.00, and these others are subsections, but it might, that would just be how I see it. So, yeah, I'll figure it out.
So that brings me to a question then. If the guy that owns the last house in Bay County needed 8 trees,
Yes.
and then let's say one of them or 2 of them dies,
Mhm.
are you required to put them back in? And under 5.01.04, it says that the component shall be maintained by the property owner in perpetuity, which means forever there should be at least 8 trees on that property.
Right.
So this is a big task on the city to keep tabs on this.
Mhm.
You know, you'd almost have to employ at least one person to understand what is needed to keep up with this, and that's,
Even after a storm, people didn't replace their trees,
right,
you know?
yeah, so,
Oh, it's in the environmental section, 50406.
Yeah, I
Which
think
probably
I-
should have been done.
Well, I can tell you that the replacement of the trees has been in this document since the beginning, but it has
It's not
never
enforced.
been enforced.
Been enforced.
Yeah.
5-6, it's
I mean, if you lose one, you should put a new one in.
Yes.
Yeah, but does the city need to come and inspect
Yeah,
and
but
make
this
sure
is
you
for
still have
the
8
entire
trees?
development, not
That's
individual
what-
lots.
Mel
That's what they
asked.
mean to be followed.
You
Yeah,
did
the-
the tree watcher.
Okay.
The perpetuity part seems difficult.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, your land development code is intended for the construction phase, not a
Yeah.
forever.
Although it doesn't here say 1 year, they must be maintained for 1 year. I don't know if that language is intended to talk to developers, and there's that pot of money that you mentioned.
Well, but that's up to y'all whether y'all want to have that policy to include the pot of money. I don't, right now, it doesn't have that in there.
correctly, then this requirement for one tree for every 15 linear feet of boundary is required was applied to each individual parcel?
Yes.
Residential lot?
Correct.
Yeah, we had 2 living trees in ours, so we get 6 more palm trees. Well, we had, the palm trees survived, so we
Yeah,
put more palm trees to go with the,
I did the same after my
I mean-
trees.
Yeah, but now if a palm tree dies, you'll have to put in a different kind of tree.
So better hurry up
If
and
you
place
follow
it.
this language.
Keep the
you're
water.
kind of deep, because I got a dead
I'm
palm. I got a dead
Giving you
palm
a little brief there.
Hey,
that
That's a-
trying to get replaced
that's
for
a
6 months.
miscommunication I wouldn't have made, so I'm just saying, glad you got all the trees you did.
We need to take a look at that.
Yeah.
Because there's some issues here.
I could definitely see both sides of that, though, that you want shade trees, but there's landscaping, you have a bunch of palm trees on your lot, and now you're gonna have to put trees that really don't, I don't know.
Well, we had a massive canopy. We were very, very green.
Exactly.
And it cooled the city, it made it beautiful, and it's the most noticeable thing, even to those of us who have been here for so long. It still hurts when you go down the road and you don't see trees anywhere. So if we're going to get back to what we were and what the majority of people seem to say they want, then we're going to have to replace that canopy, which cannot be done by planting just or primarily palm trees. So, you know,
If I can just quickly draw your attention to page 5-6 in the very top, section 5.04.06, where it talks about
Slow down and
trees.
say that.
Section
section.
5.6, page 5-6, the
Okay.
very top of the page, section 5.04.06. That, under trees, part A, that ratio is still in there.
Right.
But I wouldn't have interpreted it the way you guys have been describing. That's not what you do with it.
Yeah, because right now, if they're in the platted subdivision and the plat doesn't dictate
Right.
it, they wouldn't have to do anything under this language.
Right, but I wouldn't have interpreted that to be meant to be installed on each individual lot of a subdivision. That's not how I would have interpreted that language, but that's what they've been
But it
doing.
is.
That's what, yeah.
It is.
Subdivision or no subdivision, it's
Yeah.
individual lot.
Yeah.
Subdivision has never been
Yeah.
a qualifier.
Yeah, it didn't matter, apparently.
Yeah, right.
So we can update, or Laura can update that section.
One of the issues that I found when going through this in the proposed one and looking at what's in here now, is I see so much where we have had an abysmal record of enforcement on all of this, and that has led to a lot of the problems that we have regarding trees, just in trees. So we need to keep in mind that we need to try to strengthen what this says regarding trees so that enforcement is a clearer path to take.
Here's a little visual that to Lisa's point, when there's a healthy canopy, I think this is Ocean Plantation, and it's what a developer did. It's around the pool over in Ocean Plantation. So I'll pass it around, but you can just see that's sort of what a typical, normal community looks like. And here is 15th Street,
Yeah.
where nothing was required. I mean,
Yeah.
you can quickly see the distinction that these visitors mention when they come in. Or here's a commercial property on Highway 98 in front of Mango Marley's.
Yeah, nothing.
So this is what it looks like if you drive through Panama City or Fort St. Joe, really typical community, and this is what Mexico Beach looks like if we don't change this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Pass that around so you can see it.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yes.
But if you plant canopy trees along the beach, it's gonna block the people's $1 billion view.
So some of those, especially in the east end, are
I'm just
up.
saying, if you do plant a canopy tree along 98, the people pay
It's what ugly.
so many hundreds of thousands of dollars to review the golf is now blocked by a tree. You're gonna have some unhappy citizens.
Depends on the height of the tree, but yes.
Well, you're
It's
starting off
potential.
at 10 to 12 feet.
Well,
But most of them are 32, so
Yeah.
they're gonna look right over the top of them and.
they,
But you
right
can
now, they're
also-
saying they have the discretion of where they're going to plant those trees in
No,
the
I'm
yard.
talking about if the city does it. I'm not
Yeah.
talking about the
There's,
homeowner.
that isn't mentioned there, to plant along 91.
Well, should the city have to follow the rules to the,
On their
Mhm.
own property, but they don't have property on that.
Yeah,
we own the beach,
Well, I don't think anybody's gonna go plant a tree on the beach.
we got palm trees there now.
I don't think we're talking.
I guess
we're
there's
talking
a
in
very
different-
slim chance it can
Yeah,
happen, but
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, well,
So you're gonna work on this so that
So
so it makes
I'm-
clear that we're talking about all properties, not just developers' properties, right?
So let's talk about the parameters here. If you have another hurricane and it wipes out all of the trees or 68% of the trees, is the preference to require, which is what I had written, was to require the individual single-family home property owner to replant what was lost?
I think it's to replant to what's required, just like you have to replace windows to what's required.
And that's not a problem to write, it's an enforcement, like Mel's saying, it's an enforcement issue, and if, it's not a problem to write it, I will just,
Well, that goes back to the perpetuity language. Do you want to require it forever or just for a period of time?
Me personally, I think the forever is gonna be pretty tough, but I would like to see it really clear on what a person walks in to build a home, how many trees they're supposed to have, and what type of trees they're supposed to have, first and foremost. If we could just make it clear to start with, and then this
And then
clause of
obligation
1 year
to
later,
Yeah. From when you're-
because right now, I think that we're unclear on the number, maybe the size, and the type of tree. I think in here it says a 10 to 12 foot minimum. Well, that's not a minimum. What's a minimum setback on the front? 15 to 20? No, it's not an arbitrary number. A minimum shouldn't be 10 or 12. Right? A minimum number to have a quorum is not 3 or 4 in our case.
Well, it's gonna be difficult to go and find an X number of trees that are 10 feet. You might be able to find that one as a 12 foot, that I can see saying in the range of 10 to 12, not a 10 foot or a 12 foot. I mean, you're gonna have difficulty finding.
That's written right now, it
You
says
need
the
to have
minimum.
a single number, I think is what we should.
I am.
Minimum, okay,
A
then
minimum.
minimum then. Yeah,
that's what's
minimum.
round up, right?
Minimum of 10. And what,
well, does the trees shall have a minimum overall height of 10 to 12 feet at the time of planting, is what it says.
And if we need tree coverage, and we've agreed that we do, why not just make it 12 and take away the 10 to 12, just a minimum height of 12 feet, since most of the homes are 32 feet anyway.
okay.
Where are we?
Overall height of 10 to 12 is what you're saying.
Minimum.
So what section is that?
5.04.06.
So take out 10.2 and just make it 12 feet?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's a minimum.
Yeah.
So we go back to the first page, I think Lisa had some comments, and I wanted to talk about the 5.01.04 maintenance responsibility, because that perpetuity word was in conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So landscaping component shall be maintained by the property owner in perpetuity. Do we want to change that? Is that what you wrote? Is that what I was hearing? We wouldn't want.
Somewhere
we
else
wouldn't-
you have a requirement for one year. And I thought the chair was
To keep it-
suggesting.
Yeah,
1 year.
it was I think it referred to after planting, it needed to stay alive for 1 year, and we have to have something for a performance bond measure.
Right, so really 5.01.04 probably, at least the first sentence could come out because you got the 1 year requirement elsewhere.
Yeah, that requirement, where I found it is 5.05.02. It falls under protected trees. And that is, in that section, it is C1A. Replacement trees which do not survive 1 year from planting must be replaced at the developer or property owner's expense. And that's why I thought this was applying broader than just developers, because it says property owner, which is, it's each one of us.
Yeah, but that is for a protected tree.
Understood.
Which could be different than just a regular tree.
It could be.
And it has been in the past, the sand live oaks have been the protected species in this town for decades.
When Gina Johnson was over working with the building department, she told me after one of these meetings that it's not uncommon that people would tell her, no, I'm not putting in irrigation. After I get my CO, I don't care if they die, because
Exactly.
I don't want to take care of them. So they're ready for the palm trees to die off and not be
Exactly.
bothered with them anymore and pluck them out.
And yes, that's been an issue, a big issue. You know, so putting something in here where it says it must be maintained.
There's a home, I think it's down between 20th and 21st Street, right down here, that was tornado damaged. And I don't know if they've just gotten their CO, I think they just have, or they're pretty close. But most of their palm trees were leaned over and dead and brown, and thankfully they were replaced. I don't know if the owner just decided to do that for aesthetic reasons, or if the building department told them they had to do that. That's what I'm hoping this clarifies. But that home was probably, they probably had their CO about a year ago. I think it was sometime last summer.
So are you suggesting 50104 should be at least 1 year?
I am.
So strike
So
out
I
in
just-
perpetuity.
So I guess my question is, why wouldn't you want them to take care of it? This is generally, and then this other section that we were just referring to is what you would consider when you're replacing a tree, when you took out a protected tree and now you're replacing it, then you have to make sure it survives for 1 year. But this is generally, this is like ground cover, this is like your mulch, anything that is installed as a result of a development order, you
I
want.
guess
them
I'm
to-
looking at it from an enforceability perspective.
Sure.
And I hope we have the mechanism in the city that can enforce it for 1 year. That there's this fund, or whatever you mentioned, Mr. Attorney, that we can somehow try to keep the developer and the homeowner focused on it for 1 year.
I would
Can
submit,
you require that the landscaping be maintained forever the way it was established?
Maybe not the way it was established, but within the requirements. I mean, you can go move the flower beds. If a tree dies, you can plant a replacement tree somewhere else in the yard. You can maintain the required number of trees and landscape items, but not necessarily in the same pattern. But
Yeah, I don't disagree. I'm trying to figure out, if this is
If-
policy, are we going to enforce?
yeah, if I had to put myself in the code enforcement officer's shoes and I'm driving around town and I'm noticing things, it's easier for me to say, okay, that doesn't meet code because I know what it's supposed
It
to
can
do,
come
rather
up.
than say, has that been there for a year? And then, do I need to write a citation, or do I need to go look up when it was installed to figure out if it's been there for a year? So, but if I know that it always has to be a certain way, then I know
Or
whether or
count
not there's a
it there.
citation.
You can count, and you can compare them to the list, which I would personally like to see the list of trees go back in here the way it was. These are native trees, rather than taking it out and just referring people to that website. It's not a whole lot of ink, it's another chart.
I would like to see
It's-
that
it's-
chart back in here
We
too.
can put it as an appendix maybe, it is a lot, it's a long list.
It's,
It's not that much
It's-
of a list.
The list that you have in there currently, I would say, doesn't encompass all native trees within Fayetteville County.
The
But-
clearer that you have these regulations, like showing people right here in the regulations what they can have or should have, the easier it is for people to see what they need and say, oops, I'm gonna have to do this. If you say, okay, go to this website and look up and see what trees you have, excuse me, that doesn't
but if
work.
we were
We
trying to
do have to
encourage certain
do it.
species, and you said oak is one of them,
Yep,
pine is allowable,
for
magnolia is
Florida
native,
statutes a lot.
is it within this board's prerogative to specify that? Can we set that policy if we want to do it that way, rather than, it sounds like going to a website and interpreting that could be more complicated than if we
Yes.
just, there are 11 here, and it's encompassed in 2 pages.
Yeah,
Well, I will look at that
That's
website and I'll bring out the list and we can compare. To see
So
what
this,
is,
what we defined before tonight was, desired tree list was cabbage palm, what was acceptable at this point. Chapman's oak, live oak, magnolia, sand live oak, sand pine, slash pine, wild olive, myrtle oak, wax myrtle, neo pine. So there were 11 that were
Yeah.
encouraged.
there are more than that.
Well, and this
We have elms, native
board
elms.
may want to recommend more than 11.
Right.
If the Lord brings the list back and you'll
And this
look
board
at,
could recommend this 11 or 10 or 8
or
if we
20,
wanted, right?
you could add to the list if you want to.
I think it's about making it clear for
I agree.
everyone trying to
Bless
build
you.
that list.
you scared him to death.
You woke him up over there, come on now.
We've worked hard to be clear in setbacks and impervious ratios and
Yes,
a number of things that, yeah, I realize it is at the end of the building process, but there's no reason to not be clear here.
exactly.
On certain trees, is it better to define the caliper of a tree or the size of a tree?
You mean the height or the caliper?
Yes, because you can get a pine tree 10 foot tall that looks pretty bad.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And where if you define a caliper, you know what you're, I mean, it's more size too.
I heard you mention that the landscape is beautiful in the Rosemary.
Oh, yeah.
There's got to be some other policies and some other instances out there to take a look at. We're not the first community to try to consider how to.
It's beautiful.
There are many of them do consider calipers.
Mhm, mhm.
So, but you bring up Rosemary, there are homeowners association documents, probably, I don't know for sure. But typically you see in homeowners association documents, more minute detail on some stuff. I represent a lot of HOAs on our beach, and one of them in particular has, you can only plant this kind of stuff in their declaration. So, you see that in an HOA, the question is, from a policy standpoint, do you want to get that granular in the city? And if so, then that's what you recommend to the council.
I've heard people say that Greg does a pretty good job of, for new construction, adhering to the 1 tree per 50 linear foot, right? So the building department is concerned with building codes, not so much trees, but when they issue a CO, they ensure that that policy is followed. But the building department's not the tree police.
Right.
So probably what I'm hearing then is at which time a CO is granted or issued, that should be given to our code enforcement officer to then put it on their tickler file or calendar to say, okay, on August 13th of next year, I gotta make sure that that lot has all the trees that were supposed to be there.
That's right.
So the code would, the suggestion would be, when the code gets notice of the CO, the code goes out, takes a picture of the lot with the trees, and then a year from now, then they can compare what they're seeing to the picture. If that might give them some evidence of whether or not they're still in compliance or not.
So I just looked up, and there are 79 native trees to Bay County.
Okay.
But probably not all of them are desirable.
Well, I would submit any native tree is desirable. It provides habitat.
Well, some more than others, I'm
Some-
sure
some-
arborists are gonna have their preferences, but we've said in our policy that oak thickets shall be regarded as protected trees. So we're making a statement that oak is desirable, right? So it would seem that when we state this, and as we have before, they're high on this list, Chapman's oak, live oak, sand live oak. Just to me seems if we specify a few trees that we want, that's a heck of a lot easier than saying, go pick from 79.
Just for discussion purposes, since we're requiring 40% of the trees to be from that list, then I want to make sure the list is big enough that they have an opportunity to choose appropriately.
And whether or not
We have, I don't
palm
know.
trees are on the list. We started out by talking about that. It would
Well,
seem hard to completely exclude palm trees. I
If
can
you-
also understand it probably won't get as much of a canopy if you allow, if you say that 100% palm trees can satisfy the requirement.
Yeah, you can say. you
Seems
can
to
have
be
one
that there's
palm tree
some
or something.
Yeah,
ratio
if
there
you
that we should take a look
allow palm
at.
trees to fill a need, they're gonna use them because they're the most inexpensive trees. So
Sure,
you might
and
get 100%
People are buying a beach home, but
palm trees.
palm trees are desirable, that makes sense. I have palm trees, but I don't just have palm trees. Birds don't tend to make their nests in palm trees. But I don't know that we could totally exclude palm trees, because people are going to put palm trees because they want palm trees, and that makes sense. But maybe we can create this language so that there's a minimum of one hardwood tree per lot, or some percentage that encourages something besides just a palm tree. There needs to be an oak, or there needs to be a magnolia,
Well,
which thrive.
okay, then look at it this way. We require one tree per 50 linear feet. Of the required trees for any lot, half of them have to be shade trees, half can be palm trees, or whatever the ratio you want to be. I mean, you can specify that. You can't say you have to have 8 trees because, you know, you don't. I mean, you don't know how many
It's a
because of the size of the
calculation.
lot. So let's determine for how many ever trees you are required to meet that linear foot compliance. 20% can be a palm tree,
Yeah,
and the rest have to be
number one, I don't
shade.
know that the 50 per linear foot are ever gonna get us back to a percentage of greenery that we used to be at.
It
If
won't.
we're going back to an
It
old
will
number.
not, it will not.
So maybe the number is per 40 feet. This is the time that we're talking about this and figuring this out, right?
That's a good idea.
There are a lot of 100-foot lots in Mexico Beach, so
Uh-huh.
400 feet, that's 8 trees.
Uh-huh.
The math on that would be 10 trees, right? If
Okay,
you were
that's
doing
two more-
40, if you were
two
dividing
more
400 by
trees.
40, that's 10 trees. You're asking a person to do 2 more trees on a lot that's 75 by 100, 350 feet. 7 trees now, 9 trees if you went to 40 feet.
Okay,
You're not asking to double the trees, you're asking the newer developments to take on a few more trees to offset the community costs.
and I like that idea, and of that, you could say 10%, no more than 20% can be a palm tree, because that would give you, if you planted 9 trees instead of 7, then you might have only 2 or maybe 3 palms, I can't do the math in my head. And the rest would have to be some kind of shade tree.
Yeah, I would like to make it as clear as some percentage cannot be palm trees, and
Yeah.
they need to come from this list, which is really clear and easy to pick from, which are native trees that grow in this soil, which are these that are specified.
And on that list, I just looked at them, there's 11, I think you said.
Yep.
7 of them are shade trees.
Mhm.
So that would give a pretty good selection, wouldn't it? 7 different shade trees to choose from? Well, that's more than that, because the pines, I didn't count the pines. Pines,
I'm not giving it shade.
oh, I beg to differ.
Yeah.
I beg to differ. All they do is drop needles all year round.
Well, I can tell you
Grow them in Virginia, I tell you.
I lived in a yard in Port St. Joe before I moved to Mexico Beach that was loaded with palm trees, and my kids grew up under, pine trees, grew up under that. They provide a lot more shade.
Yes.
A lot more shade. I'm not saying that I love them and all the pine cones and the straw that we picked up, but they provide a lot more shade than a palm tree that this city
Every
cuts
tree
down to
has
2
more.
stalks.
Palm tree,
My house was
lemon
raised
tree
with
has more.
6.
Palm tree.
So then you've said that pine is more than a palm. So
My house was ringed right up close to the house with 6 pine trees. They're all gone now. But my house was completely invisible from an aerial view because of the giant canopy that those 6 pine trees provided for my house. And the temperature in my house has gone up 10 degrees and stays 10 degrees hotter. So pine trees give a whole lot. The problem is, I'm not gonna be planting pine trees again because they fall on my house in a hurricane. So,
But according to these, what's encouraged here, you could if you wanted to,
If you
because
had
they do
enough
have a
room.
benefit. And those roots, we all know what
sure.
pine roots do, so they soak up
Branches
water.
that fall in line.
Yes,
So,
They
think
snap.
about this though. A good Florida oak is worth, what, 10 palm trees as far as canopy, right? Once it went, I
yeah,
mean, a
Probably
good Florida
more
oak
than
would cover my entire backyard.
yes.
I'll be dead.
Well, what happens if you weight the trees?
If you what?
You weight them. A palm tree's
Oh,
worth, palm
weight.
tree's worth half a tree. Florida oak would be worth 2 trees.
Big,
Because, I mean, you always gotta think about expense, because a good oak tree is $1,000. A palm tree is $350.
I should call today, because we're doing work for a company in Panama City Beach. To come to Mexico Beach and plant a palm tree at 12 feet high is $450 if you call them, and they call it Lisenby, a well-known company, Panama City Beach. An oak of the same height is anywhere between 600 and 1100.
Right.
Just he said, calculate 750.
Mhm.
So palm 450, oak 750. Not gonna break the bank if the average building construction cost is $650,000 right now per home.
okay, so where do we go specifically here? What are we changing? What are we doing? What are we writing?
So the first question I have is, you talked about allowing credits for palm trees, so I'm looking for some guidance as to what that threshold is.
What'd you say, 20%?
20% palm or 20%
No,
non-palm?
20%. Palm, and the rest shade.
I think that would be tough with the number of palms that are common and encouraged to only have 20% of the trees being palm.
Well,
A minute ago, you weren't gonna let any palm tree.
Right.
That was not me, but that was around.
So,
I've been thinking what's practical and thinking of our
Well,
citizens.
this is
and-
why you see so many crepe myrtles and palm trees, because they're so inexpensive. That's what they put in.
well, we have to look at it. Are we trying to please everybody who's gonna be putting in trees, or are we trying to regrow as much of the canopy as we want. And those two choices are in
Yeah,
opposition, so we're gonna have to decide which it's gonna be.
I agree with you, and I think we're trying to get it back as much as we can to what it used to be. And we don't know the percentage of pines to palms to oaks, we don't have that type of data. But I would submit that it was probably more palms. This is Florida with a lot of pines, they were healthy before saltwater
Yeah.
intrusion. And then some oaks, which were very noticeable, but most yards around here didn't have big oak trees. They're nice to have. So to turn it around and say 80% of them now must be hardwood trees, I think that may not be what it used to be. Palm trees were pretty popular.
We had quite a few sand live oaks. We had a whole lot more sand live oaks,
Yeah.
which are smaller,
Called scrub oak, yeah.
than we did giant
Mm-hmm.
live oaks. So, I don't know,
I think you just need to figure out what the goal is. What's the goal?
pleasing people or regrowing as much canopy as possible.
With water runoff absorption and wildlife
Take that
habitat,
in.
shade.
Wildlife habitat, yes, stormwater control. You know, palms don't help a whole lot with that. We still have stormwater issues. And we haven't regained most of the wildlife habitat. While I don't know, this new bunch of owners may not be as wildlife concerned as those of us who've been here a while. So, you know, I would say go for what brings the most to the town, which is shade trees.
I would say changing the 50-foot calculation to 40 feet
I like
would be
that.
a great start, and then 30% non-palm from a specified list of what we're calling hardwood trees here would be a great step in the right direction.
I like 50% non-palm. I love the idea of one tree every 40 feet because that will help us regain it and it won't be that much of a change.
You guys have any thoughts? I mean, we've expressed ours. Yeah.
I'm just gonna tell you, whatever percentage of palm you're gonna allow is what you're gonna get, because it's a.
Of course,
Like
right.
you mentioned, it's the
Yeah.
less
Yeah, I
expensive.
don't,
Yeah,
I don't doubt, and then desirable. I mean,
yeah. It's Florida, it's palm trees.
I like palm trees, I'm in favor of palm trees. I think there needs to be something in addition to palm trees. That's what I'm
Yes.
trying to clarify. So, any thoughts?
It all comes down to money. I mean, not everybody building in Mexico Beach are millionaires. I definitely am not, by far. So
That is a
it
consideration.
is, you always got, if you can come up with a way of incentivizing by forcing is so tough to do. If you can incentivize somebody to purchase the nice oak trees or the nice magnolia trees. If you would have told me that I could put in one oak tree for my 2 palm trees, I would have an oak tree in my backyard. But you know, we were 100K over budget, so
So
all of a sudden it was,
Well, the differential here, according to the math that I got today, is the 12-foot palm versus the 12-foot oak was about $300, but not more than $500. So if you're spreading that across 4 trees,
The
you're
incentive-
under $1,000 or
idea
$2,000.
usually works when you have incentives. If I can pay for less trees and still meet the criteria, but I guess my bigger question is, we keep talking about the cost to the property owner, but why isn't this the cost to the developer?
There is no developer, if it's just.
yeah, but we're still,
If it's
you always gotta
replacement,
be
I
concerned
can
about,
understand, but if it's original platted subdivision, why doesn't the developer install those trees?
Because those developers are long gone.
yeah,
I mean, most of these individual
It-
lots,
Well, the property owner is not building their own house.
I did,
Okay, you're an exception.
no,
No,
there's
You
a lot,
You hire a general contractor, didn't you?
no, I was a GC.
Okay, right, so he's an exception.
the price.
Okay, so you're considering developer an individual,
No.
not just a
Well,
subdivision.
Well, a contractor could be the responsibility. I'm just trying to figure out, it sounds like we're all lumping this on to.
Which
But you still gotta pay for the contractors.
Somebody-
You know, there's
I
still,
did
there's
not-
still,
I
an-
hired a contractor to build my house.
right.
Yeah.
And soon, a
So
lot
when
of
we,
times, the budgets get stretched, and by the time you get to landscaping,
I agree.
it's tough, so,
I
But
agree.
it needs to be the ultimate property owner's responsibility.
right,
and,
Not
and,
the
and,
contractor.
no.
That's right.
and because the budget
But see, I think
gets
therein
stretched,
lies the problem.
landscaping shouldn't be the victim any more than plumbing should in the beginning, or hardscaping a driveway should midway. It's,
Because the individual contractor is not going to relay that information to the purchaser of the house. They're not gonna say, okay, now you have to put in 8 trees. They're not gonna tell that to the property owner.
but the building department can
They're
share
not
it
the
with the
building-
contractor that
but I'm
says you
not
don't get a
pulling-
CO unless this happens.
But I'm not pulling the building permit, the contractor is. They're
And
getting
the
the CO.
contractor's applying for the CO,
Yeah.
right?
I've not known any individual building on an individual lot who did not know these details.
Yeah, I completely
Not in
agree.
Mexico Beach. You don't have to be the contractor, and yes, the contractor may go and pull the building permit, but I haven't yet met anybody who didn't know the details.
So you're in 100% compliance.
No,
Right. So somebody's not getting the message.
Well, how are we not in compliance if you gotta have a CO? Because believe me, first thing Willie did, came out, counted my trees.
exactly.
So how do we get something like this house right here? This house was built not long before my house, this on Fifth Street,
That's,
and there's nothing there.
yeah, 15th Street. That's,
That's the newer one on 15th Street?
yeah.
It looks just like the one on Fifth Street. Can't tell them apart.
If you were in 100% compliance, I would agree that the message is getting out there. But if people aren't installing the trees after they get their CO, then somebody's not getting the message.
Well, over the years, here's what I have personally seen. I have seen people plant sticks in the yard, literally sticks or branches, and said, oh, it's just not blooming yet. Or as soon as they get their CO, they go and they pull up every tree. So,
I've seen the same thing.
yeah, it becomes a matter of enforcement after the fact.
So we're trying to establish policy.
Yes.
And maybe we need to complete that step. But once we do, perhaps we need to do a workshop like we've done on different topics where we bring in the building department, we bring in Greg and Willie and understand the process and make sure everyone's clear on the process and how they're sharing that process with the applicant when they come in to get a building permit. But I don't think enforcement is for tonight. We're trying to figure out policy that we think is reasonably enforceable, so.
Well,
So we need to put something together here, whether it's 40 or 50 or some other number per linear feet, the height of a tree that we establish 12 feet, and then some percentage of trees that are not palm and come from a list that we designate.
okay, I recommend that we do one tree per 40 feet instead of one tree per 50 linear feet. And that we say, no more than, I like 50% palms.
And I threw out 30. Did we hear 40
Okay.
from anybody?
Okay, I'll go down to 40. I'll go down to 40.
Okay, that's,
So 30% max on
But
the
then,
farm.
I don't know, then it becomes an enforcement thing too. Somebody goes out there, you have to start counting palms and
Well,
counting.
that's what we do in the development order stage.
but that's, hopefully the people that work for us can do that level of counting.
So no more than 40% of palms.
No, I think I heard 30.
The other way around, it was 40% not palm coming from this list.
Okay, I hear 40, I hear 50. 50.
Well, she originally said 50, then she said, we go to
I'll
40,
go to
so,
40, just
so
move
it's
along.
40%.
So a maximum of 60% palms.
Correct. And the other 40% to come from the list that we want to return to the document.
And I'm gonna bring you a better list that you can consider, with more variety and diversity.
Okay,
So it's
we
also
can
important.
consider it, but I don't think anybody wants it to be more confusing. We're trying to make this whole process clearer.
Well, I don't think it's just gonna be a list, as you requested.
Well, good. So there really isn't anything that could be clearly, well, should we make a motion because it's easier to move forward with?
I know Laura's trying to move this along quickly, but there've been a lot of areas that y'all have highlighted tonight that need some work, so I'm not sure how you quantify that. but-
Yeah, I don't know if you mentioned a workshop, is that something?
Well, I mentioned a workshop after policy was established so that the people that enforce it are clear.
I got
The people
you.
that
Okay.
inform the building applicant.
Well, Laura, you were gonna suggest another potential meeting with P and Z. Would you have this updated by the time of that? And then if you have an extra meeting, just look at this one section, she can add in the protection and preservation of environmental sensitive lands and drop in the floodplain, and then you can look at it all at once.
Okay. So are you
We do.
suggesting some meeting that's not
look-
the June meeting?
Yes, can we look at the 18th of this month? That's 2 weeks.
That's 18.
2 weeks from today. Right?
Yeah, May before.
I really think the real problem would not so much be your individual homeowner, it's gonna be people with rental properties. They're the ones that really wouldn't care about landscaping, would they? I mean, I don't know any of my friends that live permanently that don't just dope on their properties. So, yeah, I think that,
Yeah,
I think that's really the thing, the people to worry about are the rental properties, right?
I don't know that you can-
Part-time property owners, not necessarily rental properties, because there's a lot of part-time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I get, you're right.
Yeah,
there are some people that don't care, some that do, and policy doesn't matter whether they care or not. It just needs to be clear and enforceable. The 18th works for me, Laura.
okay.
You guys, you know,
I'm good.
if the 18th can work for you?
I think I'll be gone. I think I'll be back in time.
Okay.
That's okay.
But if we got 3 and Neary's back, it sounds like we should move forward with that date.
And that'll be at 6 o'clock.
Yes, sir.
All right, if that is it, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Adjourn.
Motion and a second. We're adjourned. Thank you.
I'm a newbie here, I'm kind of not ready to. So. In Citrus,
Okay.